Well, welcome everyone to today's webinar titled Report of Foreign Bank and Financial Accounts, or FBAR. This is Brian from Strategic Treasurer, and we're pleased you could join us as we discuss FBAR requirements, timing, and how to manage them to ensure success. Our speakers for today are Kristen Cifaldi, Director, Product Development and Analytics at Strategic Treasurer, and Craig Jeffrey, Founder and Managing Partner of Strategic Treasurer. Welcome, Kristen and Craig, and I'll now turn the presentation over to you.
Thanks, Brian. Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining us for 50 minutes on the topic of foreign bank account reporting. I'm pleased to see so many people engaging on this topic. Compliance sometimes is viewed as boring, but we all know the difference. We know it's pretty good. So, and Kristen, it's good to be on a webinar again. I think it's been 3 months since we've been on one.
Too long.
Way too long. So thank you for joining, and let's get started. What are we covering today? Our topics of discussion, our agenda, you can see the overview. We'll talk about the goal, impact, and requirements. So the goal or the purpose of FBAR is, first started off as a tax and then was a terrorism funding focus and expansion of that. And what are the impacts and requirements? There's reporting requirements for filing foreign bank accounts if you are a particular type of entity. So accounts that aren't reporting through U.S. banks. So we'll go through that in the overview section. Then we'll shift over to timing. We have a couple calendars laid out. What should be done when? When do you need to gather information? When should you be prepping? When should you make sure you notify employees who are signers? When do you need to file? And what's the extension? So there's a few key elements of timing, and Kristen will go through that in an appropriate amount of detail and very effectively. There's also some colorful charts which are so pleasing to the eye. And then who should handle the filing? And this is a question of, is this something that's done by the tax department? Is it something that's done by Treasury? Is it tax with Treasury's assistance? Is it Treasury with tax's assistance? Is it someone else? Is it a third party like Strategic Treasurer? And so some of the discussions around that, the answer is not one answer fits all, but it could be any one of those three. Those are the three most common issues. Tax has to do it with Treasury providing information, or Treasury takes it on, and then who does the corporate filing? And the question is, who should do the individual filings for the signers, right? If you're a signer for FBAR, you have to do filings, but it's for your business, your work. So does the company, does the organization do that on their behalf? And I think that's our view, is that the company should do that on behalf of the individual signers if the individual signers give permission. And that's a key word, is some of the words that we'll use today, that you'll want to understand what they mean within the FBAR and FinCEN world. Signer is one of those. What's a FinCEN signer? Is that a bank account signer? I think not. It's a slightly different element, different definition. On the key takeaway side, there'll be three things we wrap up, covering what we discussed during the 50 minutes. We'll discuss and cover some thoughts on security, protecting data. There's personally identifiable information. There's key information like account numbers. There's a practice and process for due diligence. And finally, what are the support resources that you need to support? Do you need experts? Do you want to do that in-house? Does it make sense to build that expertise up on your own? So that brings us to the overview. And as you can see on your screen, this has Kristen written all over it.
Thanks, Craig. So FBAR overview. Here we're going to go over purpose, requirements, and potential penalties if FBAR is not filed timely. The objective of FBAR is to ensure financial transparency and accountability. It's collecting data to help prevent tax evasion, money laundering, and terrorist financing. There are reporting obligations that go with FBAR. The FBAR must be filed with FinCEN, which is part of the U.S. Department of the Treasury. And they call their filing BSA e-filing system. And that system takes XML machine-readable files, or you can upload detailed PDFs there for your filings. If you have the capacity to generate the XMLs, that is by far the easiest way to get your filing completed. There are consequences for noncompliance. If there's criminal intent, it's up to $250,000 in fines, 5 to 10 years in prison. A willful violation, so intentionally hiding an account and not reporting it, would be the greater of $100,000 or 50% of the balance in the account at the time of the violation. And for non-willful violations is a maximum penalty of $10,000.
Yeah, so I think you're trying to scare us on some of those things, but
Get your FBAR filed.
so, well, and it's true, and there is a difference on if you have a personal interest in the account, their enforcement is extremely strict. If it's a corporate account, we haven't seen the type of penalties, jail or fines reach anywhere near that level yet, but it's becoming more serious there. One thing I wanted to just mention too, Kristen had mentioned an XML formatted file that can be uploaded and a PDF. And they're still calling those smart PDFs, right?
Yes, they are.
Smart PDFs, you put all the information in. If you have a lot of accounts, you have 22 accounts, ends up being like 18 pages of...
Yep. The more accounts, the more signers, the more detailed PDFs you have to fill out. I would think of that almost as doing a tax return for each individual signer. It is multiple pages of data, whereas if you can have the ability, and the specifications for the XML files are posted on the FinCEN website, can be downloaded and shared with your IT team on how to generate that out of maybe your ERP system. So if you can get that XML, you can do what's called a batch filing, where you can bundle all of the signers into one document, and then it just goes off, and it's such a much smoother and easier process.
Yeah. So the other term is batch filing, right? Smart PDFs, batch filing. These will be on the quiz, perhaps. All right. We don't have a quiz. I think we just have some poll questions. Yep. So this brings us to our first set of poll questions. Thanks for going through that. The first one is multiple choice. You can select all that apply. What constitutes a signer under FinCEN regulation? So this is the tricky question. This is a good one for arguing. So we'll let people take a look at that and answer which ones apply, some or all. If you're unsure, that's fine too. There's some comments in the chat box about if you're having trouble seeing the poll question, some tricks to handle that. Alt-Tab, it might be popping up behind your screen. So go ahead and fill those out, and we'll be back with the results shortly. Also in the chat box is a follow Strategic Treasurer on LinkedIn. This is extremely important to our marketing group, and it's we've been challenged to make sure that a lot of people sign up for it so we don't get in trouble. So if you would make sure you're following Strategic Treasurer on LinkedIn, we would all be really happy. Was that too much pressure?
No. Never miss another informative webinar if you're signed up. Perfect.
Yeah, this is LinkedIn. You can follow our company on LinkedIn. I think everybody's already in the maybe the webinar email spam generator. All right. So look at this, Kristen. We've got what constitutes a person who can complete KYC documentation. Okay. One who can approve a funds transfer in a portal. That's right.
Yep.
One authorized to add signers to accounts. That is the tricky one. That's not right.
Yep, correct.
So the first one is someone complete KYC documentation is not right.
Correct.
So if you're keeping track of your scores, that's where they are. One who can enter a funds transfer in a portal. So approve a funds transfer or enter. Both of those are right. A signatory in a bank account. That's also right.
Yes. Yep.
And then an owner of the legal entity. Is that one right?
That depends.
Depends what else they're doing.
Yeah.
Right? just owning it, they may not be a signer.
Yep.
They may have to fill out BOI, B-O-I documentation, but not that. So was this hard? Was this a mean poll question? This is the, and you know, one of the things about this, Kristen, it's so funny. It's like, but they're not a signer. Like we know what signers are from a banking standpoint. Yeah. And then there's a FinCEN signer, which is like, okay, if you by yourself or with someone else.
Can move money
electronically. So if you're in a portal and two people can do it, you're one of those two people, you can do it. And the other thing, the one thing that was hard on this one, I think, is one authorized to add signers to accounts.
Yep.
Yeah, you can. If you add yourself, then you become a FinCEN signer. But if you're only authorized to add signers, you're not.
Yep.
This is hard stuff. So I think that's a example of we're mean.
All right. So continuing with who's required to file here, and it's anyone who has greater than $10,000 in foreign financial accounts. So these are your signers, anyone who fell into that list, the portal initiators or approvals, and that's in aggregate. So if you're on, a bunch of accounts and they add up to combined 10K at any point in the year with their maximum balance, even if it's different months, you have to file your FBAR. So that's another confusing piece that I find to be confusing. So, and those would be for the individuals with a financial interest in the account who may or may not have signature authority, but they do have that financial interest. For folks with no financial interest, that's your corporate signers. As we already discussed, that's your folks who can initiate a financial transfer. So whether that's your junior analyst who just enters in the wire information and then somebody senior approves it, both of those folks are going to have to file an FBAR if they're U.S. citizens working with foreign-based accounts. Entities eligible for FBAR, publicly traded corporations, as well as private, large organizations, as well as smaller businesses, even if they're unincorporated sole proprietorships, financial institutions. And then we were going to talk about a little bit more in depth, I believe, about who can file on behalf of someone for FBAR. So according to IRS and FinCEN, that would be attorneys, tax attorneys, CPAs, and IRS enrolled agents. So these are folks who have gotten approval from FinCEN by completing quite a bit of paperwork to prove their credentials and years of service working on FBAR to become one of these IRS enrolled agents to file.
Yeah, excellent. There's a question that came in while you were stepping through that. It says, if you haven't filed past FBARs with FinCEN, how many years do you have to go back and file? And
that's a good question. Off the top of my head, I don't know how many years you have to go back. We did have someone, one of our clients a couple years back, they discovered they had an FBAR eligible signer who had not filed for about 5 years, and we did have to do every year going back. So definitely have experience with at least 5. I would venture to say 7.
It's 6.
Oh, it's 6. Oh, man.
It's 6.
Craig knows everything.
I don't know everything, but I think 7 is the best guess because you think of tax forms.
That's your tax forms.
But it has a 6-year thing. I think that's just meant to.
They want to confuse us.
And it works. It works. Now I hope that's right because this is being recorded and people can make fun of me later. But I think it's 6 years, and you have to maintain records for 6 years. So it would drop off at the end. There is a reference in there. If you go to the FinCEN site, you can see that. So comfortable. And so this is one of those charts that looks great, Kristen.
Well, thanks. As a side note on that person who was discovered, there were no fees assessed on that as a penalty, just so in case people were worried or nervous about those fees. We've got deadlines for filing here, and the deadline for FBAR is very fluid. So officially, it's tax day, it's April 15th, and that's the official deadline for both individuals and corporates to file. However, there's an automatic no penalty extension to October 15th for corporates and individuals. And oftentimes for individuals, that gets extended to the following April 15th. So that's what happened with 2023. Those ended up being due April 15th of this year, 2025, for individuals. The corporate, not recently, has been extended past the October 15th that I'm aware of, at least in the past 8 years that I've been doing this. So we see oftentimes folks whose tax departments are doing these filings will wait, because obviously they're quite busy around April 15th with other tax duties. So they tend to wait until the October 15th deadline. And that doesn't cause any problems necessarily, but if you have failed to notify your individual signers that they have to do something on their personal taxes and they already filed their personal taxes by the April 15th deadline, they then have to file an amendment. So that can cause a problem for them or a little bit of a headache if the corporation isn't filing the FBAR on their behalf. Could also necessitate you to help them with their amendment if you are filing on their behalf.
That's a really good point. Yeah, that brings us to our second poll question, which you should see appearing on your screen shortly. This is, you answer only one of these. How do you handle filing for FBAR? You do it in-house, you use a third party, partially in-house, partially third party. We're evaluating our approach. We're not subject to FBAR filing, unsure, or other. So, great. And while that's coming up, we've got another question. I don't know if you want to handle that or if you want me to.
Where is the definition? Which explains the... Yes, so the definition from government documentation is going to be on the FinCEN site, and we can send that link out to the person who asked that question, I believe, or to everybody actually afterwards. And the FinCEN site does indicate that portal users, initiators, and approvers are required to file FBAR. In addition to that, every single year that I've worked on FBAR, this question comes up from one of our clients, and every single year our CPA calls FinCEN and talks to them, and they confirm that that is the case. It has not changed.
Yeah, and the language that's used there, it doesn't say if you're a portal user. It relates to if you can, on your own or in conjunction with another person, make a transfer. Using electronic methods, that would qualify. So certainly doing it through a portal qualifies. There's other ones that would qualify as well. But that's where that comes from. So don't search for the word portal. Search for the word electronic.
You should always ask yourself, can the person touch the money, transfer the money? And that's kind of the root of FBAR.
Excellent. So we have our answers. In-house, 43%. Unsure other, 23%, that's 66%, that's 2/3. We're not subject to it. We just love to be on. I was going to
say, thanks for joining, guys. If you're not subject to it, we appreciate you.
That's right, 15%, so it's awesome. We're evaluating our approach, 1%, so 4 people are evaluating their approach. On the partially in-house, partially third party, 10%, slightly less than 10%, and third party, 8%, so excellent. Good information. I think that covers the questions that are in the box. Someone's typing. I'm not sure we'll be able to answer that live, but we will try. And that brings us to the working calendar. This is the same beautiful calendar with more information.
Yes. So as I mentioned when I was chatting last about our other beautiful timeline, it's important to notify your signers so they can get their taxes done. People get sad when they have to file amendments or they can't, they feel pressure that they're waiting to file their taxes, depending on, their personalities and how detailed oriented they are, or type A. So we recommend checking in January to follow up, on permissions. Who is a signer? Checking that out, notifying the signers. At the same time, if you're able to pull your data in January, which is not necessarily possible for everyone, take some time to identify those highest balances. Test the formats. Are you going to use the PDF? Do you think you can use the XML? And then having your signers, if you're planning on filing on their behalf, sign what is called the IRS Form 114A. So that's the 114A IRS form. And that would allow the company to file on behalf of the individuals. We recommend also, if your individuals are opting out, they want to file their own FBAR with their own tax professional, that you just get that in writing as well, so you have it for your records. So that process can continue on through January, February, sometimes into March, depending on when that year-end data is available. It's also very important to note that you need to be using FX conversion rates from December 31st of the previous year. So for this year, you would use, for the 2025 filing, which is the 2024 calendar year, December 31st, 2024, is the conversion rates that you need to use, and those rates are published by the IRS. Oftentimes, if you're using a TMS that has an FBAR module, those rates are integrated into it. And if you are unsure that they are, I would reach out to your TMS provider just to, feel secure and double check on that. As you collect all your information, continuing validation and testing into March, if you're using the XML filing system, there's a BSA test system that anyone can create an account and test file in. You don't have to be the tax attorney or CPA or IRS agent to be testing the files. That could be anyone who has access to upload the file into the system. You've got your April 15th deadline. Hopefully you make it. And then you can move on to reporting, archiving, making sure that your tax department or your Treasury department is got those records stored for those 6 years. Thank you, Craig. And, if you don't hit that April 15th deadline and you're opting to head towards the October 15th, we would just kind of continue doing that process. Make sure that your signers are knowing this and that, you've reviewed any changes that could be posted, just checking on those deadlines. As I mentioned, sometimes the individual signers get bumped out an additional 6 months from October, so checking that out. And we want to also make sure when we're checking our data, are all of our foreign entities on our list? Have we chatted with the folks over there to make sure that everything is included? Are all the accounts captured? Signers? Who's using that portal? Can they really, initiate or approve funds transfers? Is it necessary for them to be doing that? Maybe we can eliminate an FBAR filing if you just have someone, logged into your portal and they never actually transfer money. And then the most important thing that you can do at the end of the year, each year, is review your signer list and make sure that anyone who's moved on to a different opportunity or a different department is no longer listed as a signer. We oftentimes see folks who are retired, who have moved to different companies, who are now working in finance area, still listed as signers. This is not just a paperwork, headache when you have to file FBAR. It's also a security concern. So just making sure you have those policies and procedures in place. Somebody moves departments, they are immediately removed, and then you're checking it at the end of every year. If you let that slide and somebody who retired, let's say in April, and you didn't catch it until January 2nd, they have to file FBAR for that whole next year. So it's very important just to check and make sure at the end of the year that everyone is removed. Yeah,
that's certainly good bank account management hygiene. And it saves on the reporting as well. There's multiple questions that have come into the Q&A box. A couple of those, there are specific situations about companies that we would advise on specifically and won't answer generally. So I'm sorry, we won't do that on the fly. So for clients, we'll answer those things specifically and provide the reason and backup for it. There's a couple more questions. Timing to inform FBAR filers of 1040. What are the countries in Schedule B? I don't know if you look at the calendar here. I think when would you notify an employee or somebody who's a signer?
I would notify them as soon as possible in February or March. If you're going to be delayed gathering your data, I would let them know. I see a question here. If you're identified as a signer on a foreign account, how does that get reflected on your personal taxes? So if your company's filing on your behalf and you filled out that 114A form, all you have to do on your personal taxes, you'll excuse me, I forget the exact reference, but there's a very short section. You check a box that says, yes, I have a non-financial interest in a foreign account, and then you list all of the countries. So if you're the Treasury or Tax Department listening to this webinar, that's what if you file for your employees, that's what you would notify them of. Just a list of the countries that they're signers on, and the timing of your filing so that they can know for their personal taxes.
Excellent. And there's a couple other questions like what about who owns the funds? How are those handled? We're going to pause on those. Those are good questions, and those require answers. It depends on the type of organization as well. There's a few other factors there. And that brings us to what are some of the common barriers, challenges, and pitfalls to be aware of? I always remember, those little funny sayings people say, if you fail to plan on failing, right? and so we're not trying to be snarky by saying lack of a plan. We could have written lack of a comprehensive plan to handle FBAR filings, to handle some of the compliance issues. This is a challenge. As you saw some of the details on the calendar, there's a lot of steps that are involved. And so a comprehensive plan has, specific elements to it. There's dates, there's times, there's a follow-through. That's one of the most appropriate aspects here is being comprehensive. There's a lot of details on this, and this is one of the reasons why we run this as a business is because there's so many different points to managing it, and for most companies it's a distraction. And so the idea of having a comprehensive plan is a way to remove one of those barriers. The second one is lack of access to data. Kristen has mentioned a number of the data elements that are necessary. What are the high balances? You might have what's the conversion rate? Where do you get that? Right? Do you have to pull that down from Bloomberg or some other source, or do you get that?
Don't pull it from Bloomberg. You have to pull it from the IRS website.
Exactly. That's right. You get it from their site, and there's a single rate used for the year, and so you have to use that one. Do you have access to all of your accounts? Some people have lack of visibility to all their accounts. It may be done regionally, and it's vital to having access to all the accounts, all of the signers in a clear way. And so you may have a dedicated bank account management system. Maybe that's embedded within a treasury management system or a legal entity management system. You need to make sure all that data is there and it's current. The third point here is procrastination of gathering data. The why put off to tomorrow, what you can put off to the day after tomorrow. This is where you run into problems. And Kristen gave a good example of, she said, let's say you get removed from an account on January 2nd, you have to file for that period of time. And we've gone through, and some of our clients we've gone through, we've done the audits, we're filing back years. And some people had left the firm 4 or 5 years ago. We're still on a portal, or we're still on signers. And they had to file like 4 years, and they were not so happy.
Yeah.
I've been gone for 4 years. I still have to file because you didn't take me off. Those aren't pleasant conversations. It's like, it is what the situation is. And then you can take them off, and then it's like, and next year, because you were taken off this year, you'll still have to do it the year after. And those aren't fun conversations. failing. And so that really rolls into that point with the beautiful purple clipboard, right? Remove portal, signing rights immediately following the end of employment, and make sure they're taken off. Make sure you didn't just send it, something stopped it from being removed, and you have extra years to file. This is where that good bank account management hygiene comes in. And we do have another webinar on bank account management coming.
Tune into that.
So tune in, save your popcorn. It's all good. No centralized record keeping. That is, if you have a core system and a place to save that information, that is important. Sometimes there's the thought of, hey, we filed the forms digitally and I know where they are, and then I leave and someone else comes in and they know what they did that year, and then nobody can go back the 6 years. We recommend keeping it 7 years. Nobody can go back and maintain what you filed. And so you have to have a clear way of having record keeping for your account management, what you filed, and provide that type of proof and documentation. Supremely important, often overlooked. So you have to think about record keeping from an institutional perspective, not from an individual perspective. Where do I store data? That is very important for much of what Treasury does. And we're always, well, this is how I organize it. It makes sense to me. And someone else comes in and doesn't know your style or method of numbering, labeling, and you can't always search everywhere. The last is inadequate training and awareness. And again, we're not trying to be edgy here, but there are a number of nuances with compliance regulations that exist. It's really important to know what's right. Where are you going to be in compliance and not? The penalties are, they're significant, but the key thing is how can you know and make sure your people and your teams are trained right, that they're aware of what the requirements are. Now, we oftentimes hear, and this was, Kristen, you had talked about that, is every year we call, are these still valid? And it's like every time we get the same answer. Now, there have been some questions we've been able to squeak out a different answer here and there, but some of them are not. And we've heard treasurers and we've argued with them, some good friends. Well, this doesn't apply. That's not a signer. It's like, it's a signer from FinCEN's purposes. Yeah, they've written it. It's listed. It's listed in both the it's either listed in the law or it's listed in the regulation that's been upheld. So you do want to make sure you're following what's valid there. All right. So after common barriers, we're getting to other concerns. What are some of the security concerns that you need to think of as you look at FBAR? Well, there's a lot of confidential information. There's bank account information. There's balances. Who are the signers? That's pretty good information. Then if you are handling individual signers, you might have, and filing on their behalf, you might have their tax information stored somewhere. So first question is, do you have a system that ensures you have secure tracking of signers and amounts throughout the entire process? Is that available? Is it set up? Is it natural? Do you have 100% visibility to all of those? And does it allow you to track things? Like your Excel might not track it as well, but does it track you are an authorized signer on this particular account from this date to that date? And you have an audit trail of when those things were canceled, because you'll have to file for a partial year. So who can access that data? How is it protected? How is it encrypted? How is it blocked off? Those are key issues, because that's a bit of a mother load of key data. Now, hopefully on your accounts, if someone got a hold of the account numbers, you still have your security set up, but that confidential data is needing solid protection. The third item here, right in the middle, is there a secure and knowledgeable review process to catch potential vulnerabilities? So as you look at and you have a well-formed, comprehensive plan, have you reviewed it? Will you catch vulnerabilities do we have all the accounts? Are all the accounts that we have reviewed, and we know which ones are subject to FBAR, which ones aren't? Where might we have an exposure for our storage or archival? So I want to make sure that those are done. The fourth one here is, can you quickly get expert guidance on security concerns and compliance issues? Do you have the expertise in-house? Do you have a a law firm on retainer, a CPA firm, or a third-party firm that tracks this information, can get you the answers you need about security, about complying with the regulations, answering those questions, and can they provide you the documentation, like here's the reasoning, here's the source of that within the regulations or within the law directly. And then the last one here is the security concerns, is who's responsible for securely storing and protecting critical filing materials. We recommend keeping it 7 years. You have to keep it at least 6. You want to keep it secure, so the principal least privilege restricts it, but you still need to have access and make sure that people can get to it. So it might be in a vault that can be opened or turned on. We have a way that we use and do that for our clients. You probably have some way of storing things in your company, but you need to make sure that it's accessible only to the right people. This is too critical information to let it get lost or to let too many people have access to it. And it's not stored in, hopefully you're not storing in paper anymore.
Yeah, I hope not. I don't think they let you send paper in, so you've got to at least have some electronic copy of your PDFs or XMLs.
But what if I like paper? All right.
That's okay.
You can like it, you just can't send it in.
I did see one question, and I just want to answer it because I don't want anybody to be nervous. I've never heard of an individual with non-financial interest facing IRS penalties because their company failed to file on their behalf. So if you're scared now that the IRS is going to knock on your door and ask for 10 grand, that's not something I've ever heard of happening to the individual with non-financial interest. So hopefully you can sleep well tonight now.
Or at least partly.
Yeah.
Sleep somewhat well tonight. So the poll question is up. What's the greatest pain point with filing that you have? So pick your top pain point. This is select one. I did not do the filing. All the way down to securing sensitive information. What's your top pain point? Be interesting to see how that comes up. And if you would type the word FBAR or the acronym FBAR in the chat box, if we have 150 people type FBAR, we'll share all the results. I think the first one is probably the one that people really like, those questions. I saw some people asking about those. The mean question. People like the mean questions.
I also saw a question where someone was saying, what can you do if you've left your company many years ago and they've still got you on the bank accounts? I don't know if you have, maybe some folks that you worked with are still there. I would try to contact, your supervisor or someone in the department if that person's no longer there, and express your concern at getting removed and be an advocate for yourself so that you're no longer subject to this FBAR requirement. So I think that just reaching out and trying to notify them that it's important to you, that you don't have to do it anymore, that would be the best course of action.
Okay. There's a couple of questions in the chat box. I'm just looking at the time, how many we have left. I think we can answer them. That's right. We got 11 minutes left. So if you have to file your own FBAR for company accounts, does the company have to be given a copy of your FBAR form? I'd say the answer is no. You have an individual responsibility for that. So the other one is, our U.S. non-resident aliens filing 1040-NR required to file FBAR? So I think the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you can, if the general thought on this is, if you are subject to U.S. regulations or rules, like you're a citizen, you're living overseas, or if you have to file a 1040 form, that's where they have you and can require you to do that. Yep. That's that point of control. The last question I'll answer is, does every signatory have to file FBAR if they have no access to send payments? Now, this one's tricky. So they wouldn't be a portal signer because they wouldn't have access, but they would be an actual signatory. They could go to the bank and do it. So they would have access to send. They would have the ability to send payments, and would therefore be subject to it. Those are good questions. Yep. All right. The greatest pain point in filings, I didn't do it. That's a good pain point. Gathering all the necessary information. that good bank account management and FBAR hygiene, then quite a few others. I think for determining if you're required to file, that's a very real question. So a lot of good answers there. I think we'll skip on those just for the sake of time and brevity. So,
all right. So just kind of going over some of the demands of different approaches. If you're handling it individually, the do-it-yourself, how are you handling the confidential data? This is going to require manual effort and oversight. Your data would be handled personally, so the corporate wouldn't have to worry about that. But it would require personal submission and tracking by your individual signers, and the corporation would still be required to file the corporate FBAR filing in that instance. So if you're doing corporate in-house, hopefully you're managing your confidential data by internal teams to streamline your workflow, and you've got those encryption and secure processes, principle of least privilege in place to protect folks' personal information, and that you're going to store it securely, as Craig talked about, for the recommended 7 years. And also, you've got your corporate team ensuring compliance. So hopefully you've got maybe a tax counsel or a CPA that, specializes in FBAR, whether that's internal or external, that you're consulting just to make sure, everything is done properly. If you're outsourcing it, you've got external experts handling it. Data is managed externally. Recommend definitely checking on how they're securing that data and making sure that they have the correct retention period and that you have access to that data if you need it. And these are hopefully dedicated professionals that have been filing FBAR for many years and have that in-house expertise at their fingertips. All right. So what you need if you're going to handle this in-house, as we've mentioned a couple times, you need that tax attorney, CPA, or IRS enrolled agent. You need an easy way to communicate with your employees in other countries, which we know can sometimes be a headache with differences in time zones and different systems if they're working at subsidiaries. And you just always want to secure that personal identifiable information, both the corporate and your employees, and just store that securely and make sure that only the need to know folks are looking at that. All right, so we're finally to final considerations. Just reinforcing security and compliance, ensuring timely and accurate filings so that you stay compliant, meeting that extended deadline if you can't hit April 15th, protecting that sensitive data and storing it properly, performing your due diligence, maintaining records of all accounts, entities, and authorized signers, keeping on top of removing folks for security purposes, and to save yourself paperwork headaches and talking to folks who may no longer work for you. And then just regularly reviewing and updating those records for accuracy. We know everyone is time crunched, Treasury and tax teams in particular, especially at this time of year, but just booking out some time in Q4 of the year before to make sure you're reviewing that before the rush.
Yeah, I think on the support and expertise, we say stay informed on leading practices and regulatory changes and evaluate whether external assistance can enhance efficiency and security. I guess what we'd say here is it's a question of focus or distraction. Is this an area that you need to focus on fully to get done, or does that become a bit of a distraction? There's certainly things you have to do for bank account management. You can't just ignore it. But there's certain things that you need to understand. But do you need to handle that across the board? Do you have a system or a process? Do you have a system for keeping track of signers, balances, and information? Because that's necessary to support the filing. Or do you have a broader process that includes the system aspect, maybe a bank account management software, a TMS, a dedicated platform that'll do that? And do you have a process that'll help you through all of the stages. So if you're saying we're a company, we're going to do our corporate filing, we're also going to offer to do the individual filings. Do we have a process lined up for that? Do we have a system that supports that? And part of that process now means I've got to get individual FinCEN signers to give authorization. We file on their behalf. When someone doesn't do that, what do we provide to them if they're an employee and a signer but don't want us to file on their behalf? What if they're no longer with the company? Do we have to give them account information and balance information? And some of the answers to that are no, you don't have to. Makes it hard for them to do, and so they have to file with limited information. And that's why it's quite beneficial if the company takes it upon themselves to file on behalf of individuals. If the individual doesn't want to have that and they want to do it on their own, they can go ahead and do that. Now we have a few more minutes. We have a couple, I guess we were 17 shy of people typing the word FBAR in the chat box. So if we have 17 more people type it in, all that information will be shared with love. I think if we fell short, we'd probably share it anyway. Since I only asked once for one question.
It was pretty close.
That would be me. And I think we're over. Now we're well over.
Yep.
Awesome. So, the other thing to think about here is there's foreign bank account reporting, beneficial ownership information reporting is also, there's some rules and regulations. Some of those it's optional right now, and there's some things marching through the courts to figure out if that's going to be fully required or not. It seems most people are accounting for that. So who are the beneficial owners of entities, which is something that you have to keep track of at anyway, and especially if you have to report it. So that's another aspect of the compliance regime and making sure it makes sense. All right. Now that we appreciate your attention. Thanks for the great questions. There's more questions that showed in the box. This is excellent. Some of your questions are really hard, so thank you for stumping us back. We appreciate that. And for other ways to connect, Lee is a great person to contact. You can see his information there, lee.patton@strategictreasurer.com, and you can see his phone number as well. Feel free to connect with him if you're interested in any of the services we offer, including bank account management, foreign bank account reporting, and services like that. There's also a bank account and portal management webinar coming up. Kristen will be doing it. She'll let me join her, which is good. She'll do all the hard work.
Yeah. And if you reach out to Lee, you might get to talk to me on the phone as well. So that's always a bonus.
It is. It's a double bonus. It's excellent. So thank you so much for attending. We'll turn it back over to Brian Weeks, and you have a great rest of the day. And Brian.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Kristen. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. The CTP credits, today's webinar slides, and a recording of today's webinar will be sent to you within 5 business days. And as Craig mentioned, be sure to register for our webinar on bank account and portal management by clicking the link in the chat box. Thank you, and we hope you have a good rest of the day.